Hello and welcome to another installation of TechTalk. Great to see you, gentlemen. Another week. We're getting close. Mike, what do we have towards the end of the year? We're getting close. What is the subject?
Well, the subject today is, I guess the subject can be the question that's being asked, and that's plain and simple. Is it ready to grind? So being as you mentioned, the time of year that it is, everything's go, 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 rush, rush, rush. The jobs have been delayed with weather and the other issues, which of course adds to the big push up to Christmas. So that question has been coming up more and more: is how soon is too soon? Is it ready to go? When can I get onto the concrete? And of course, as with most things in life, there's no simple answer, but here's certainly some of the things to be wary of and to look out for. Who'd like to kick off?
Mike, before we get started, do you have any more details?
No. I just need you to tell me if it's ready to go.
Not doing it. Waste of time. Waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, since Josh is gone, I mean...
I just want to know if I can grind. Tell me now. Can't you hear it over the phone?
That's just an open-ended question that has so many factors which will determine if it's ready to grind or not. We talk about the environment, whether it's inside, outside, whether it's a hot day, cold day, is a slab on ground, what the slump is. There's so many factors that go into pre-grind, I guess, decision that there is no real answer to say, yes, it's ready after 5 days. Is it ready after 5 days? I don't know. It depends on all those factors and so much more. Sometimes, yeah, you can get on the slab and grind it at 5 days, no problem. Other times you go there and it's like a sand pit, depending on different conditions. But it's also, are we just grinding it, or are we going to go and polish it now for final results? So everything, it depends on the environment, I'd say. What do you think, Josh?
I think maybe we should change the question a little bit to something that we've probably got a bit more capability of answering, and that would probably be something more like, what is the meaning of life? I think we could probably better answer that in a shorter period of time.
This is going to be a two-parter.
Yeah. Look, Milan, you bring up some really good questions there. And I think there's a few things that we need to consider as contractors. One is, why do we want to get onto it so soon? Usually the pressure is coming from somewhere, whether it be a compressed program of your own as a contractor or a compressed program of the builders. And that would have me approaching it in two different ways. Because if the builder wants me to come there inside of, let's say, we're going to use the rule of thumb that everyone uses globally for concrete initial cure is 28 days. Now, there are so many other rules around that figure, but that's the rule of thumb, 28 days, okay? I'm not going to start an argument over this. I'm just going to use those as a
There will be arguments, absolutely.
And there should be, because there's many to have. But let's say we're going to use that one, and we've got two different scenarios here. You want to get onto it as a contractor after 7 days, versus the builder you just want to do after 7 days. If the builder or the client wants you to do it inside of 7 days, there's a few things here. I want a clause in my contract that I'm not going to be responsible for anything for getting onto it too early, because I know that if something goes pear-shaped with this project, they're going to point the finger at me. Say, for instance, we've got a topping slab, it's been down for 7 days, it's indoors, it's down by the ocean. They want me to start this infill or topping slab inside of 7 days, and there's no saw cuts in the floor either. I can guarantee you this is going to go bad, right? We're talking about potential delam and almost guaranteed cracking.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't want to have any of that coming back onto me as a contractor. I don't actually want to do it inside of 7 days, a project like that. But that type of thing, that's got to be approved by the builder and by the engineer before I start. And if nobody wants to put their name on it, I'm not putting my grinder on it. Period. I'm not going to allow their compressed time frame to become my liability at the end of the day. That's
Can I throw the keyword in there that we talk about a lot? I mean, can we do a sample? Is that something we could do? Or?
A sample is going to tell us a lot of things, but I'm going to try and back this up a little bit before we get to that. So there's a few things that we need to consider. The things that influence the curing times of concrete or drying times of concrete, and we've got two different things that I just brought up there. One was curing and one was drying, and they're both important. In particular, the curing is going to determine what type of strength we're going to have in the concrete when we come back, when we start our initial grind. We're going to get about 75% of our initial cure in the concrete at about 14 days. If we wanted to get onto concrete inside of 14 days, and it was specified to be 25 MPa, which is cute. If we actually specified 32 MPa instead, because they wanted us to get onto it sooner, that concrete would be hard enough for us inside of 14 days because that 75% reaches our target. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this is quite common in commercial construction. Say, for instance, the finished needs to be 42 MPa for us to start grinding on it, and they want to do that inside of 2 weeks. They pour it in at 60 so that it hits that 32 MPa, 42 MPa rather, a whole lot sooner. So the construction can commence much faster, grinding can commence faster. So there's those types of factors. If you want us to get onto it sooner because that's a part of the program, then we might have to pour something a bit harder so that the initial kick is faster or cure is faster. We can get onto it sooner. But if the builder's calling up and saying, I want you here inside of 14 days or 10 days or something like that, then there's a lot of things that we need to consider. My concern here would be, sure, 10 days on 40 MPa, I can probably grind that concrete externally and internally. But polishing it is a much bigger question because the moisture inside that concrete is going to play a big factor in whether or not we can finish it. Say, for instance, we've poured the concrete externally. It's in Melbourne, which means it's rained 28 days out of 10. Yeah, that's how it happens in Melbourne. And now we're talking about we're going to go and grind it, and they want us to polish it to the finished result. We are going to experience some real troubles here because moisture is going to become a big problem for us. We might be able to grind the concrete back, expose all the aggregate and all that sort of stuff. But once we get to the polishing stages, we're probably going to have issues with, we're going to be competing for space inside the concrete with our grout, because as we grind, all the moisture in the concrete continues to come up because of the heat that we're generating. So it might appear dry an inch from the surface, but as we're grinding, we're drawing up all the moisture from the very base of the concrete all the way to the top. So we're bringing tons and tons of moisture out as we're grinding, which means that we kind of create some momentum, because if we dry out the first half inch of the concrete, what happens is the moisture continues to fill those capillaries that have dried up with moisture that's in the concrete. It's always equalising from the bottom to the top. So that means that once we get to the stages of putting down densifier, we've probably got a bit much moisture in the capillaries than we want in order for us to get access and have that reaction that we need with the calcium hydroxide. But it gets a whole lot worse when we go to put down particular solvent-based sealers on top of that. Moisture is still coming up, and now we're putting down a solvent-based impregnating sealer, and that does not like moisture at all. And we start to run into problems. And that's why, it's another reason why I don't recommend covering a project just after we finish it, particularly on fresh pour or in a house that's not quite closed up yet.
Play devil's advocate, Josh. If we have we've managed to get to the floor to that finish, is the water-based impregnating sealer something that could be considered? Or
absolutely, that would be my preference. If we have to shorten the time frame and moisture is a concern, water-based all the way.
But because still, even then, there's a lot of moisture still trying to escape the slab. It can break down the polish that you have done, particularly in Australia. And correct me if I'm wrong here, we got a lot of salt in our sand and whatnot. So salt and water, that's all going to have a reaction and it's going to come to the surface on a form of maybe efflorescence, or it's just going to have an acidic effect on the densifier, so it will break down. So all of a sudden, you might have polished it, but you come back in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time and you look at it, all of a sudden it's bony again. Then you're back to square one. So,
yeah.
I've heard a lot of customers tell me, just going the opposite to that, Milan, that when you do get the product in there, and that they can come back in a few months' time and it's actually done even more reaction and the floor looks even tighter and better. So you're saying that it can go the other way as well if you don't get the densifiers in there.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good info there. While you were talking, Josh, I've been sort of doing a bit of thinking about some of the things that you mentioned about the curing and things. Obviously, this time of year is a great example. We have builders, they have high volume, lots going on. They want you on the slab as soon as possible. You hear up to 4 or 5 days, even people start grinding. And what comes to mind, I don't know how it all works. Like, just clear this up for me. When we have this chemical reaction, all the chemicals reacting and becoming harder, and we have, let's say, cement that hasn't reacted yet because we're early on, does that mean we have less actually active materials to react with the densifier? We have less of that because it hasn't fully cured? Or does that mean it'll still react because we have unreacted cement?
Okay. It will react in time, but it won't react immediately. And the difficulty about it is when you say that, so the chemical reaction is taking place immediately between the water and the cement, right, on contact, but the water is still present.
Yep.
Right. Some of the water is going to remain in the slab because that's become part of the solid material, if you like. But what we need as a contractor is we need to be able to fill the capillaries. There are channels to the calcium hydroxide with densifier.
Yeah.
So if those capillaries are still blocked full of moisture, we can't get any other of our stuff in there.
Yeah.
So that means that we don't get a good introduction, if you like, to the active particle.
Mm-hmm.
So our densifier is probably just going to sit on the surface.
Yeah.
And not get to where it needs to go. That's why the moisture side of it is important for us. Not because it matters so much to the concrete. It matters to us trying to get something into the concrete and reach the calcium hydroxide.
I just find it really interesting as well, because obviously when we talk about the water being the issue, having a lot of remaining moisture in the concrete, and then you think also potassium's got actually a bit of water in it as well.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work, because obviously the water does help, but obviously in due time, because we got to have that reactive particle to work with.
So from a technical aspect, you would probably see benefit doing it early as a safeguard using a lithium to get in there.
Yep.
Only because just from its capacity to get around inside with the rest of the moisture.
Yeah.
Right. I still wouldn't recommend it because from the outside, it looks like, and there's no way for us to test it, it looks like regularly hardened concrete from densifier application. And so that's when we see the scenario play out like Milan mentioned. When we finished it, we polished it up, it all looked good, but a few weeks later, it actually looked terrible. And that's because we polished unreacted densifier, didn't actually get to have that reaction. We did the project, everything looked like it was a success. 3 or 4 weeks later, we come back and just go, they stole the gloss.
Yeah.
And that's because the densifier has become soluble because it wasn't reacted. It's been in contact with moisture, high levels of moisture, and it's actually broken down. There will still be densifier in the surface, but that effect that we get that's slightly mottled about it, that's the densifier that has broken down at the surface level. And that's the stuff that we polish and create that glass-like effect.
All right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Getting a
I
little bit.
suppose some things that you could do to try and speed things up a little bit, like I guess creating airflow and things like that. I mean, they're all minor things, but I suppose it all sort of counts to try and push it. We were talking also, I mean, we've spoken at times about different processes as far as densifying and getting to the point of grouting and then leaving the job, coming back X amount of weeks later to then finish and polish the job. Is there still that sort of opportunity there? I mean, when you're talking about getting densifiers in, I mean, you are sort of doing that at the start. So, would you have a chance to be able to pick it back up then?
That's always going to be my preference, Mike. And even more so, I mean, I hear about contractors doing a first stage of a surface polish before construction as well. And it would be my preference in that scenario as well to have the structure up before finishing. A surface polish, because it's been finished with a power trowel much more densely on the surface, because the surface is so much tighter and closed up, again, it's more difficult for evaporation to occur because the surface is so tight, really holds everything in. So my preference would be, once you've done that initial surface polish, like an Aqua 200 or something like that, get the structure up, get it acclimated, control the environment, get some of the moisture out of it, and then start your polishing. And again, we increase our competition with a surface polish because we've got moisture that's been trapped in there for longer and it's harder to get out because it's so much more closed up, and we're trying to drive something into it for our process. So just a lot of spinning plates.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information to process on this subject. I guess maybe a very basic rule of thumb would be, if you were looking to grind a slab and there has been a bit of airflow, 32 MPa and above, you could get on it after 14 to 20 days without too many hiccups, but don't polish it, right? If we're going to look at polishing, best to leave it for the full 28 days cure. But also, you've got to be mindful of the environment it's in. So if it's a surface polish as well, you might want to leave it longer if there's absolutely no airflow. It's in a basement or a bottom of a building somewhere tucked away. So, but just a general rule, are we safe to say, let's say 14 days, 32 MPa slab, we can do initial grind, grout, and then walk away and come back?
You haven't given me any more information.
I mean, yes. Generally, I'd say yes, but, obviously there are variables that majority of the time after 14 days, 32 MPa should be safe.
As a rule of thumb, 14 days on a 32 MPa, I would be comfortable with that up to grout. I would be comfortable with that. If we want to start bending the rules and making a project go faster, it's possible, but we need to consider all the factors.
And then we need to tighten the contract as well if that's going to change.
Yeah. It's good because, I mean, if a builder wants to increase the speed of a project, it can all be done, but there are some factors that need to be considered and also put into the contract to ensure that all the all the risk is taken out of it, not just from a environmental changes, but from an engineering perspective as well. The engineer's got to sign off on that and be happy with the changes too.
You mentioned a little earlier on that moisture is the problem. So my question, you mentioned that also living coastal. So what is the issue with living coastal? For those amazing people that are working right on the coast, what is the issue for them being coastal, Josh?
You've just
because of the way that evaporation happens, it's or the way that humidity is created, right? That's basically created down by the ocean or where large bodies of water are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of humidity down by the ocean, and the land gets warm much faster than the ocean does.
Yeah.
So we create this pressure pattern right down by the coast that effectively encourages the concrete to suck in all the moisture that's in the atmosphere. We've got really high levels of humidity right down by the ocean because this is kind of where it's being created right now. So homes down by the ocean or coastal get a lot more moisture in them every day. As soon as the sun's coming up, they're basically sucking in moisture, and concrete is like a sponge, and it just brings it in and then breathes it out, in, out. So that's why it's very, very difficult to create the best scenario down by the coast at any time. And for the coast, I'd absolutely recommend using the water-based impregnating sealer.
I was going to say, it sounds like we've got a special on that this month because it keeps coming up. I was going to say, even if it's the best job in the world, but you live down by the ocean, still go with that impregnating sealer, the water-based.
And the other thing is, many coastal homes, particularly in Melbourne, are holiday homes, and they are designed by people who live in Melbourne, who understand Melbourne climate but not the ocean climate. And they don't tend to allow for enough ventilation in the project down by the ocean because they're not familiar with this. A local architect is going to be a lot more familiar with the materials and how they react down by the ocean. So ventilation is key for an oceanside home, but don't depend on the architect doing their job for you. Just pick the right sealer for the environment.
So if you're building a holiday home on the peninsula, just get a Sydney architect and you're safe. Done.
Can't afford it now.
Righto, guys. Very good topic. I think it could go on and on and on. I think there's a lot of factors that come into it there, absolutely. But I guess at this sort of point, what we say is please comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Give us some examples. Don't be afraid to put some pictures up.
Happy to talk about some more. Like you say, it's a really big subject.
And if you're still unsure whether you should get on the slab, or you can always give us a call, but be prepared. There'll be a lot of questions to find out what the scenario is that you're working with before we can give you some sort of guideline.
What did you say? Get on the slab. It's about that sort of time. Yeah.
It is.
There's a lot of moisture
that time
in that slab, and I'm willing to take that moisture on.
Well, we've been talking about...
Never too soon to get on it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're also talking about, being by the beach, by the coast, so...
You're o'clock, you reckon, Dave?
I'm feeling like what you're putting down, mate.
Righto, guys. We'll finish off there, will we?
Enjoy the weekend.
Absolutely.
Have a cracker weekend, guys. Bye-bye.